Welcome back to AI-Splainer, where we try to make sense of the big, complicated issues. Today, we're diving into a question that so many Filipinos face every single year. With all the money being spent, why are our streets still turning into rivers every time it rains? Let's get into it.
Yeah, this picture, it's a scene that's become way too familiar, hasn't it? For so many people, this isn't some rare, once-in-a-lifetime storm anymore. It's just life. And you can feel the frustration growing, especially when you find out how much money is supposed to be stopping this exact thing from happening.
Take a look at this number, 545 billion pesos. That's how much the Philippine government has poured into thousands of flood control projects since just the middle of 2022. I mean, that is an absolutely massive mountain of public money that's meant to keep people safe and dry.
Which, of course, brings us to the biggest question of all. If we're spending that much cash, what's going on? Where did it go? To figure that out, you really have to follow the money. And that means we need to understand how the national budget is supposed to work in the first place.
Okay, so let's break it down. Every year, the government puts together this gigantic financial plan for the whole country, the national budget. Now, it seems super complicated, I know, but the basic idea is that it's designed to be a clear, step-by-step process. So think of it as a journey for your tax money. It all kicks off with planning, where the big economic goals are set. Then you get the proposal stage, where all the different government agencies say what they need. After that, it goes to Congress for legislation. That's where they debate it and turn it into law. Then the money is released. Agencies can start spending. And finally, there's the audit, where the Commission on Audit, or COA, comes in to check if everything was spent properly. Now, here's a really key part of that journey. You have two major documents. The first is the NEP. You can think of this as the president's wish list. It's the budget proposal that gets sent over to Congress. But then, Congress takes that list, makes changes, and passes the GAA. And that is the final approved shopping list that actually becomes law. And trust me, what happens between the wish list and the final shopping list is where things get really, really interesting.
So, in theory, the whole system is like a solid, well-built dam, right? But in practice, well, it's got some cracks. And just like a real dam, those cracks are where the water, or in this case, taxpayer money, starts to leak through, going to places it was never supposed to go. This seems to be especially true when it comes to flood control. One of the biggest cracks is something called a budget insertion. It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. While Congress is debating the budget, legislators can add in new line items or more money for projects that were never on the president's original wish list. Now, they have the power to do that, sure, but the sheer scale of these insertions for flood control is just staggering. Just look at the 2025 budget. The president's office proposed about 254 billion pesos for flood control, but the final law? It came out to nearly 500 billion. The budget almost doubled. That's an extra 242 billion pesos in insertions. And the huge question mark is, where did that extra money suddenly come from, and where is it all going? So where do these inserted funds go? Well, an investigation turned up a major red flag. It turns out that at least 18 members of Congress have direct financial links. They either own or are connected to companies that have won these big government construction contracts. That, right there, is a massive potential conflict of interest. And this quote from Weena Guerra at the University of the Philippines really gets to the human cost of all this. She says that these disasters are not just natural and climate change phenomena, but moral indictments of state failure. Wow. In other words, when you mix mismanagement of money with a powerful typhoon, the results can be absolutely devastating for ordinary people. You know, we actually have rules to prevent this kind of thing. The Supreme Court created what's called the rule of singular correspondence. It's a fancy name for a simple idea. Every single item in the budget must have one specific price tag for one specific purpose. It's meant to stop these vague, lump sum funds that are just ripe for abuse. But you have to ask if these huge insertions are really following the spirit of that rule. So, with the public getting more and more outraged, and even the president admitting that things aren't working, the government's official watchdog has finally stepped in to follow the money trail. And here's how it all went down. The Commission on Audit, the COA, already had the flood program on its to-do list for late 2024, but then things kicked into high gear. By August 2025, the president himself was raising the alarm, which prompted the head of COA to issue a memo basically saying, put this at the top of the list and audit these flood projects now. And by September, that official audit was underway.
And the goal of this audit is crystal clear. They're not just going to be checking receipts. This is what's called a performance audit. They want to answer one simple, incredibly powerful question. Did the hundreds of billions of pesos we spent on this stuff actually work? Did it actually prevent or at least reduce flooding?
Now, the audit might hold people accountable for what happened in the past. But what about the future? The real question is, how do we build better guardrails into the system to make sure this doesn't keep happening?
Well, experts have put a few key ideas on the table. First, really crack down on the procurement rules to stop contractors from biting off more than they can chew. Second, and this is a big one, disqualify any company from bidding if it has financial ties to a sitting member of Congress. Period. Third, let's be realistic. Our flood master plans need a serious update for the age of climate change. And finally, let's create a digital monitoring system so that you and I can see exactly where our money is going in real time.
And all of this brings us to one last really tough question. We've seen this cycle of disaster, scandal, and then nothing so many times before. But with climate change raising the stakes higher than ever, the real challenge is whether we can finally break that cycle. Can we turn what some have called infrastructures of plunder into infrastructures of accountability?
And that's our deep dive for today. We've tried to untangle this really complex web of budgets, politics, and audits to get a clearer picture of why so many places are still flooding. If you found this explanation helpful in any way, please do us a favor and hit that like button, share it to get the word out, and subscribe to AI Explainer for more breakdowns of the issues that really matter. Thanks so much for watching.